Hollywood. Chapter 7. Promise of a Perfect World. "What's up, Square?" Pac begins as always, and then bursts into that contagious giggle of his. The levity and big energy in his voice make me smile. "Boy, what do you want?" I've just gotten home from a rehearsal at the studio. I'm tired, I have Rottweilers to feed, and I'm not in the mood for his nonsense. As usual, though, Pac couldn't care less about whether I'm tired. He's on a mission. "Look, there's this movie I want us to do together called Menace to Society." What? Am I dreaming? I thought back to a few years earlier when I'd arrived in LA in the early summer of 1990. All I wanted to do was win, win, win. And I believed if I played the game right, it would deliver me the life of prosperity, peace, and happiness I had always wanted. That was the dream. Trying to make it as a queen pin hadn't offered me that dream, though the game had taught me a strong hustle, a hustle I brought to LA. There is no such thing as overnight success. Everybody who grabs the spotlight probably looks like an overnight success because you ain't know them before they got on the scene. Behind each one of those stories is someone who is willing to suffer setbacks and put in the hard work, hoping for a little sprinkle of luck. The best talisman I had was my mother's belief in me. Without it, I don't think I would have been able to pursue an acting career with such confidence. But just like everyone else, I had to deal with the classic Hollywood catch-22. If you don't have any recent or current credits, you're stuck trying to get credits, which you can't get if you don't have any credits. How to overcome that? Your training, talent, skills, and commitment to hard work are all valuable assets, for sure. Connections, as everyone will tell you, can be helpful, but can't make you. A connection can't give you a career, but it can help open a door enough to get your foot in. And timing is crucial. There is one other asset that might seem to be a curse, but can turn out to be the ace up your sleeve. For me, that was my education from the University of the Bmore Streets. I had cultivated fearlessness and a no-nonsense attitude. After all I had seen and been through, I knew any trials Hollywood had to offer would pale in comparison to the trials I had already withstood. However, it was sometimes a double-edged sword, because some would say that I could come off as abrasive, distant, and aloof. I didn't seem approachable, which until now had worked as a beautiful defense mechanism and kept me safe. But here in Hollywood, it seemed as if I had a chip on my shoulder. I wasn't aware of this edge because that's just how we rolled back on the East Coast. I also got lots of pushback for being rough around the edges, whether it was my Baltimore accent or the fact that I wasn't your clean-cut girl next door in my style. And oh yeah, I was too hairy. On the East, hair was considered sexy. Hairy legs, arms, upper lip, even bushy eyebrows were celebrated where I was from. I once had a very famous black actor tell me at a pool party when he saw me in shorts, "Jada promised me that you'll never shave your legs." I remember thinking, gladly. With all the Hollywood nonsense and scrutiny that came my way, my edge helped me stay true to who I was and where I came from. And that so-called chip on my shoulder was my refusal to lose myself in the very white Hollywood standard of poise, dress, and attitude that was slowly but surely being pressed upon me. Black talent was in vogue, whereas blackness off-screen was not. Often I heard the question, "What are you mixed with?" Excuse me? Is your mother white? No, she happens to be full-blooded West Indian. I would answer proudly. Oh, that's it, the Indian in you. This casting director was trying to imply that to look as I did, I couldn't be of full African-American heritage. And he assumed that the Indian in my mother's heritage meant Native American. It got to the point where I saw such comments as ignorant and ridiculous, but I could not believe how frequently I heard them. What got me was the constant look of disbelief whenever I replied that both my parents were simply black. Ringing in my ears all the time were my Aunt Karen's words about never speaking on the mixed blood anywhere in my bloodline. She'd emphasize that people would always try to use that influence in your background as an excuse for why you had any appealing quality at all, even if the one relative from another race was from 3 generations ago. They'll never want to give your blackness credit, Jada. Don't let them do that. Whenever the questions arose, at a time when I was knocking on doors, hoping they would open for me, I thought of Aunt Karen. Once I began to enter these audition rooms, I would come across a lot of fake wolves posing as producers, casting directors and such. The Hollywood flex was amusing, but there would be quite a few times when I let jokers know I ain't the one. Compared to the real wolves of B-More, these show business jokers were more like little puppies. Sometimes I got nervous because I always wanted to do well, but this wasn't life or death for me, like it was for some. I knew all too well what life and death looked like. I could keep everything in perspective and just ride. The hustle became fun and exciting. My real edge? I knew it was all a game. Los Angeles itself can be deceiving to the uninitiated. The palm trees, the balmy weather, and the slower daily tempo can trick you into thinking you're on holiday every day. But I learned quick that these LA streets weren't nothing to play with. I was still an avid skater, so it worked out well that both the first place I lived in Culver City and my next address on Comey Avenue off the corner of La Cienega and Venice gave me close proximity to World on Wheels, the skating rink I hit every chance I got. Other than that, LA was like a foreign country to me. What confused me most were the colors and reppin' neighborhoods thing. I didn't understand what all that had to do with making money. The gangs didn't own the property they were dying and repping for. On the East Coast, street cliques hooked up to make money. A clique might rep an area of the city based on money made, not based on gang color. Clearly I was out of my league, so I kept my nose clean of all that. But LA trouble had a way of finding me anyway. At home, you knew when you were in a neighborhood you should not be in. LA was different. You could be in a neighborhood that looked like a working class area with nice lawns and palm trees, and the next thing you know, you'd get got. In other words, robbed, carjacked. One night, driving home from World on Wheels with one of my homegirls, a packed little hoopty pulls up beside us. I see some dudes up against the window looking as if they created a new version of pop locking, ready to battle some East Coast b-boys. I start laughing and tell my girlfriend, "Look, they pop locking." My girlfriend looks up and her mood turns. "Oh shit," she yells. "They throwing signs. They about to jack us. We gotta go." I stepped on the gas of my Civic CRX so fast and hard, we sped down Venice all the way into Culver City until I made sure we lost them. That would not be my last run-in with LA's unpredictable nature. For all the differences in Los Angeles and Baltimore, I found my people. We loved to frequent places like M&M Soul Food or Silver Spoon. That couldn't be beat for a Sunday breakfast. Then we prowled through the Slauson swap meet, which became my go-to, where I could shop for everything, even new woofers and stereo systems for my cars. I loved going to Lamert Park to join protests or to enjoy the outside markets. Not far from there were the aisles of Esselwan Books, an iconic Black-owned bookstore that featured Black authors who focused on subject matters of interest to people of color. I found books there you would never find in chain bookstores. Not too far from my house on Comey Avenue, over by Rodeo on that side, as opposed to Rodeo in Beverly Hills. I was out and about when the acquittal in the Rodney King trial was announced. I'll never forget how Black people poured into the streets, rioting and looting. The community was furious, fed up, tired of a system constantly reiterating that a Black man beaten senseless by cops had no recourse under the law. We were tired of a system claiming that the Black community was not worthy of justice and fair treatment. The Rodney King beating represented injustices felt in every hood across America, whether you were from the South, the East, the North, or the West. Whether you wore colors or Timbs, we all felt the pain and humiliation of entrenched dynamics protecting those who had no regard for Black life. My girlfriend Keisha was visiting me from Baltimore that day, and we took our frustration to the street. Within the chaos of the riots was a unified voice. Fuck this. You will hear us today. Youth plus anger plus passion plus frustration can rightfully equal impetuous acts. In expressions of anger, frustration, and the need to be heard, many got caught up in the tide that would render unintended consequences as we grabbed stuff out of local stores. At that point in my life, I definitely believed justice meant an eye for an eye. Maturity would teach me that's not always the case. That night of looting and burning down businesses destroyed resources we needed in our community, and we felt it. We knew that what happened to one of us happened to all of us. The saving grace was that in the midst of this chaos, there was a lot of love to be found in many of our homes, churches, and community centers as reminders of our worth. In the end, the tragedy was that not much changed to address the pain of that moment or to prevent the moment from happening again, or worse. The period from the late 1980s into the late 90s was truly prime time for young hopefuls like me. That was when so many doors began to open for Black actors. Hollywood was finally gaining the confidence to invest in untapped Black potential, allowing for what I often call the golden years of Black Hollywood. If you were a Black male comedian, it was practically a given that you'd have the opportunity to star in your own sitcom. This, of course, opened doors for Black actresses, but it wasn't quite the promised land. Black laughter might have been hot, but Black drama lagged behind in terms of what got made. There were few opportunities to become the next Black Meryl Streep. But what I really loved about this era was the sisterhood among Black women. A success from any of us created opportunity for all of us. I'd see Nia Long, Paula J. Parker, Elise Neal, Halle Berry, Regina King, Tamala Jones, Tashina Arnold, Melinda Williams, Monica Calhoun, Nicole Ari Parker, Layla Rashawn, Queen Latifah, and so many more on the audition circuit all the time. Nia Long was one of the first actresses I met going on auditions. We became friends and at some point even decided to try our hand at forming a singing group. Though we didn't end up following through with that, we cheered on one another in our other endeavors. As time went on, we all became full-fledged adults with very busy lives and only managed to catch quick hellos at Hollywood events. But to this day, every time we see one another, the love and sisterhood of that time remains among us all. When Halle became the first, and as yet only, Black woman to win a Best Actress Oscar for Monsters Ball, she generously acknowledged many of us and the support and belief we had for one another. I felt that her acknowledgement was a beautiful homage to that era. We all had our own superpowers, yet we had a healthy competition. We knew at some point we would each get our due in the way that was meant. There was no beef. It was all love. Always. Early on, my mother came out to visit. Because she ran into other mothers in the game who were managing their children, she suggested, "Jada, maybe I should be your manager." This was not a good idea. The process seemed easy, and some of the other mother managers had offered her guidance. But my hunch told me there was more to managing than my mom could imagine. Besides, Adrian was still struggling with addiction. With much love and gratitude, I told her that all the belief she invested in me would serve me well. But you gotta really know this game to do that, Mom. I don't think that's a good idea. We went back and forth as she ran down the examples of the mothers who were managing their daughters. And all I could think was, I get it, but no. My instincts reminded me that the laws of supply and demand would work for me. Blackness was popping, with more and more Black writers and directors coming up. as were opportunities to tell the stories of our generation. Eddie Murphy had jumped from the stand-up mic to TV star to movie superstardom in comedic and action-adventure roles, proving that Black entertainers were viable globally. Black content was booming. From The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, A Different World, Family Matters, In Living Color, Hanging with Mr. Cooper, Rock, Living Single, and Martin, to the movies from Black filmmakers like Spike Lee, John Singleton, Robert Townsend, Julie Dash, Daughters of the Dust, Leslie Harris, Just Another Girl on the IRT, Ernest Dickerson, the Hughes Brothers, and Gary Gray. All of this was happening at warp speed with a huge, beautiful cluster of Black talent. I felt welcomed into a bustling, energized, extended family right out the gate. In short, I wasn't looking for things not to work out. My future didn't hinge on all the barriers in front of me. My future hinged on the conviction that if I could get in front of the right people, those barriers could be overcome. For my first 3 months in LA, I juggled 3 jobs. My main gig at Music Plus, a record store near Pico and La Cienega. A second job as a temp for various businesses where I cheerfully answered phones, though I couldn't type worth a lick. And at night, another job in a personal injury doctor's office where I filled out insurance claim forms that weren't entirely above board. In my free time, I enjoyed taking the trek up to West Hollywood to the Bodhi Tree, another independent bookstore and a magical space on Melrose that sold a wide range of new age, spiritual, and self-help type titles. In LA, there were so many worlds I could touch, so many different types of communities and subcultures. All I had to do was find my tribe. Pac was still in the Bay Area, and he'd check up on me frequently. Every few weekends or so, I'd drive up to see him or he'd come to see me. At this point, he was becoming known with the digital underground and had started to be featured on records like Same Song. Things were about to really get rolling for him, and he predicted they would for me too. Sure enough, within a matter of weeks, my mother's friend, who had let me stay with her, introduced me to her friend Daphne. She became one of my new LA homegirls. Daphne was dating Keenan Ivory Wayans, and eventually went on to marry him. After defying the odds as an actor and stand-up turned filmmaker with I'm Gonna Get You Sucker, Keenan broke all the rules again with his hit sketch comedy show In Living Color, which had debuted the month before I got to Los Angeles. His show not only became a hit, but was an audacious representation of diverse talent and creativity in Hollywood. He was so ahead of the curve, launching careers for everyone from Rosie Perez to Jim Carrey to his brother Damon Wayans. After Daphne brought me to one of Keenan's parties, I got to know him too. He soon became a mentor in the best sense of the word. At one of those parties, I boldly told Keenan, "You need to make me a fly girl." After all, I was a dance battle queen from Baltimore. Why wouldn't he want me to be part of the dance troupe on In Living Color? He chuckled. "Oh, really?" He continued with, "Keep doing what you're doing. You got something." Keenan had an eye for talent, and maybe he saw something in me from the start. This may be the reason he chose to step into my world and put his foot down at a critical point, and in a way that I didn't even realize was needed. The backstory to this incident was one I thought I'd left behind. One of my former associates was a Philly-based heavy hitter in the drug game, and part of a clique known as Junior Black Mafia. We'll call this dude JB. When I first met him, I was impressed by his calm, confident demeanor. My girlfriend Fawn and I met JB and a few of his homeboys at the Harbor Place Mall in Baltimore. In that period, JB was among the many hustlers from Philly, New York, and DC who would come through Baltimore, especially in the spring and summer. He had his eye on Fawn. However, Fawn didn't roll in those circles without me, so whenever he wanted to hang with Fawn, I came along. This was how JB and I became cool. At one point, he invited me and Fawn to Philly. We met him at a stash house. That sticks out in my memory because when he asked, You two want to go shopping? And we said yes. He directed me to the laundry room and said to grab whatever cash we needed from the dryer. When I opened the dryer door, I found a large black garbage bag full of cash. Being nosy, I checked the washing machine next, and same thing. It was full of money too. Fawn and I decided to be conservative and only took 15 G's apiece. JB was a good friend to Fawn, but she always kept things platonic. That was just her steez. Fawn was smart to do that. She kept things simple, without hurt feelings. Besides, dudes liked the challenge of her aloofness. She was not interested, and conquerors always loved the chase of the unconquerable. After I left Baltimore, the government came down hard on the street game. Unbeknownst to us, there were full-on stings happening all over, meant to take down some of the biggest operations of drug distribution on the East. Many dudes I knew were being arrested back to back, and JB was one of them. When I got home in the summer after college, I paged JB. The feds called back, asking how I knew him. I answered fast. He didn't tell me that was his name. I know him as Harold Jackson. Made it up on the spot. I quickly explained I'd been away at college and had met this guy once at a party. Whether or not they believed me, I don't know. But as I hung up the phone, I felt my heart racing and was so sad. Damn, they got JB too. Not long after I arrived in LA, I received a call from JB, who had gotten my number from Fawn, and he asked for a favor. In short, he was going to send me some photos. He wanted me to change the dates on them and be willing to testify in court that he was in LA visiting me at the time of those dates. He obviously needed an alibi. JB was someone who had always had my back, and I had learned a lot from him. For everything he had done for me, my reaction was, easy, no problem. A few days later, while I was kicking it with Daphne at Keenan's, he overheard me explaining to Daphne what I needed to do for JB. Keenan immediately piped up. You cannot do that. Keenan usually had the most cool, laid-back, you can't ruffle my feathers demeanor, but in this instance, he was adamant and wanted to make it very clear that I was about to put myself in a very bad position. Jada, Keenan insisted, you cannot go to court and testify about dates you changed on pictures. That's perjury. You will go to jail. Now, my 18-year-old naive ass had not thought about that. All I was thinking about was that JB was my homeboy who needed my help. If you ride hard for people when they are flying high, you ride for them harder when they're down and out. Pleading my case, I said, he asked, and I don't want... Keenan interrupted and spoke to me with full authority. Lying in court is perjury. You will go to jail. His point was, what real friend would ask you to jeopardize yourself that way? I knew he was right. As terrible as I felt, I had to tell JB that I couldn't do what he asked. Years later, though, I was able to do him a solid and help his family. I am so thankful for Keenan. If he hadn't taken the time to talk some sense into my young, arrogant, thick skull, there's no telling where I would have landed. Although JB understood, I still felt this was betraying the code I knew. Being a ride or die was central to my worth. Maybe I needed to relearn the code. In the land of Hollywood, I was lucky to come across practical advice early on that made a difference for me, even if I didn't put it to use right away. At one of Keenan's bowling parties, celebrating the season wrap of In Living Color, I brought a dude from Baltimore who had just been released from one of his stints in jail. In passing, Keenan introduced my friend and me to Eddie Murphy, who was there supporting Keenan. When we asked Eddie if we could take a picture with him, he obliged. As the night went on, Eddie waved me over to where he was standing and asked, "Who is that peanut head nigga you with?" I cracked up laughing. He came back fast with words to the effect of, "No, really." I responded directly saying, "My boyfriend." "Him?" "Yes, him." Eddie smiled. Then he asked what I was drinking, which was an alcoholic beverage of some kind. He told me alcohol wasn't good for me. What are you drinking? I asked. Water. My body is my temple. As we talked, I saw the truth of this idea in the brightness of his eyes, the vibrancy of his energy, and the smoothness and clarity of his skin. He was just shiny and full of life. I thought, no toxic substances in the body makes one vibrant. That was dope to me. Most of the time you heard about big stars partying with all kinds of drugs and alcohol. I was surprised by his get down. And you know what else I was surprised by? He was kind. Eddie and I were friends from then on. He gave me a nickname, Jada May. Of course, he could make me laugh my ass off, although he wasn't one of those comedy dudes who had to be on all the time. He was smart, thoughtful, and a deep thinker. Eddie gave advice if I asked, but mainly gave me the sense that focus and intention would carry the day. Everybody thinks once you meet famous people that they should put you on. What I was learning was that if you heed the lessons successful people have to offer and stay on your game, the successful people around you will see your effort and want to give you assists. Nobody can do it for you, and nobody is truly inspired to help you in a real way if you're not willing to help yourself, nor should they. To be successful takes so much more than who you know. In nature, this harrowing process could be seen in the journey of baby turtles. Once they hatch on the beach, if you don't allow them to struggle to the water through the sand and the predators, they have no chance to make it in the ocean. And yes, most of the turtles don't make it. They get eaten by the birds that are literally waiting for them to hatch, to swoop them up and devour them. But those that make it to the water and get to reach adulthood do so having had to earn their strength to survive and thrive. Hollywood is the same. When Eddie felt I had made it to the ocean and was charting my own course, and he witnessed that I could continue to make a way for myself, he offered me a grand opportunity. But until then, I kept nagging Keenan to make me a fly girl. Although that was never happening, he always had a new gem to offer. You didn't come out here to be a dancer. You came out here to be an actress, right? Stay focused on that. He was also quick to tell me, but don't do extra work. Too many people get stuck there. I'd heard from others that if you worked as an extra, that could get you noticed. Keenan disagreed. At this early stage of the game, when I was working my 3 jobs, I didn't even have an agent. Getting an agent was very difficult and very necessary. But again, convincing an agent to take on a newcomer was no easy task. Keenan explained, it's not about the status of your agent. It's about how passionate your agent is on your behalf. He made it clear that if I signed with a big agency, it would be easy for me to get lost in the shuffle because they were too busy with their bigger clients. Find someone who is passionate about you. That's the person who will work hard for you, no matter where they are. All I asked of Keenan was, can I use your name? He nodded with a smile. Sure. It was almost as if Keenan's inner voice, with that smile, was, I see where she's going with this. Let's see what she does. I made it my mission to produce something from this nugget of courtesy he had given me. Wasting not a minute after scouring the yellow pages of the phone book and finding names of talent agents, I made the first of what I expected would be many phone calls to Nancy Rainford. Much to my shock, she answered the phone. I vivaciously introduced myself and without taking a breath added, and Keenan Ivory Wayans told me you're a great agent, and he suggested I call you. Oh, really? How does he know me? Nancy responded, apparently flattered. I didn't ask. He just said you were a great agent and that I should call you. Nancy was in. I could tell from her tone. She asked me a few questions. I told her a little about myself, and then she said, can you come meet me today? That very day I went to meet her, and we were a match on sight. When I'd picked Nancy Rainford's name out of the phone book, I had no idea she was black, and that was a plus for me. She owned her talent agency, and she had another client who was on the rise, Michael Rappaport, who became a dope friend at the time, who gave me rides to a slew of auditions. Nancy Rainford was heaven sent. Keenan was right. Her passion for both me and Michael in the early days of her agency was worth its weight in gold. Nancy went with me to almost every audition. She had faith in me and wasn't concerned in the least about my being rough around the edges. She knew that would smooth out as I matured. Nancy was fierce, smart, and fearless. I loved that about her. I would often hang out in her very small office and watch how she conducted business over the phone. She carried the same kind of confidence I had. We knew what we were made of. We knew we had something special to offer. And you were the lucky one if you jumped on it now. In an experience that was not common for actors and actresses early in their careers, I had the opportunity to listen to how she negotiated deals for me and how she'd walk away if it was not panning out to her liking. Nancy would say no, basically, then hang up the phone confidently and look at me predicting. Don't worry, they'll call back in 20 minutes. She understood early that although lots of work was available for Black talent, the deal makers loved to lowball us. Nancy, in effect, taught me how to walk away from deals that didn't represent my worth. It's a lesson I've held on to throughout my career. More than that, she showed me how the game was played behind the curtain. Soon after I signed with Nancy, I booked my first job, a TV pilot for an ABC series called Moe's World, in the part of the teenage sister of a deceased boy who narrates the show and acts as a guardian angel to his family and friends. After 13 callbacks, I was rough around the edges and not the look they wanted, but I wore them down. I discovered that booking a pilot as my first gig on a major network was a godsend and rare. Getting Moe's World was my foot in the door in the best way. By no means was it a guarantee that I would have a lasting career in Hollywood, but it paved the way towards promising opportunities. My name spread quickly in the TV world, and I had great tape that demonstrated my talent. Moe's World was also how I became lasting friends with Dwayne Martin, who had a prominent role in the pilot. This was his first acting job after arriving from New York, where he had played with the Knicks. Dwayne became a big brother on day one, and we have championed each other ever since. As the University of the Bmore Streets had taught me, there is such a thing as chasing the game up to a point, but also letting the game chase you. Both strategies can be powerful. You have to know the difference between being hungry and being desperate. You never want to be the latter. But I couldn't help being really excited when Nancy called to say that I had a meeting with a young writer-director named John Singleton for a feature film being produced by Columbia. As soon as I heard the plot, my instincts told me that this movie, Boys in the Hood, was going to be very big. Not much stands out about how the meeting started, other than the usual greetings and small talk. Then John sat down at his desk as I took a chair across from him and the casting director, who began to read the scene with me. As we read, I couldn't gauge what John was thinking. When I lifted my eyes to his after the reading was done, however, there was clearly a problem. Looking me dead in my eyes, John told me, "That East Coast accent, you need to lose it, because if you don't, you'll never make it in this business." Looking dead in his eyes, I told him quietly, "We'll see." After that, we talked a little more. I thanked him for the opportunity, and I bounced. When I left the audition, I felt instinctively that he was wrong, yet I also understood where he was coming from. Deep down, I believed that what I had to offer would overpower an accent, because the one thing you can't buy or teach is energy. The postscript to the story is that John and I became fans of each other. Whenever I saw him, I'd tease him about his prediction. He'd say, "You got rid of the accent, though." We'd both laugh, and I'd say, "You got me there." In the meantime, I chose to stay focused on all that was working for me. I very quickly started to book guest star roles, one after the other, on shows like True Colors, Doogie Howser MD, 21 Jump Street, and Cagney and Lacey, to name a few. If I didn't get the job, I was always on the hunt. As long as I was able to hunt, in my mind, I was winning. Every now and then, I'd hear feedback later with some form of, "Oh, we loved her, but how tall is she?" That's what happened when I went in to audition for a guest star role on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, then in its second season. Coming out of the casting office on that audition, I ran into, guess who? We'd never met before. Our exchange was hardly memorable. "What's up?" he asked with a cheerful grin. "What's up?" I asked in response, not giving him the time of day, and kept moving. The next time I saw him, sometime later, was in Bullock's department store, where I'd gone shopping with my mom, who'd come out to visit. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a tall, lanky, nice-looking guy trekking past me. He was wearing a backpack. Mom asked under her breath, "Isn't that Will Smith?" "Oh, yeah," I said with a nod. Again, he had that cheerful bounce and the vibe that he didn't have a care in the world. I mean, he had a hit television show on air. Life was good. My mom said, "Why can't you be with somebody nice like him?" "The Fresh Prince?" I exclaimed. He would teach me not to judge a book by its cover. In the spring of 1991, just short of my being in LA for a year, I auditioned for the reoccurring role of a 12-year-old on the TV show Blossom. When I went in for the audition, I showed up in a green onesie jumpsuit with a curly bunny tail on top of my head. No question, I looked like a straight-up 12-year-old. When Nancy announced that I'd gotten the role, I had second thoughts. Did I want to spend the next few years playing this role of a preteen? Nancy made it clear that the show was going to be huge and that a big break like this didn't happen often. People spend years out in LA before an opportunity like this comes along. I knew she was right, but something told me there was another opportunity coming. It was pure instinct, intuition. I could feel in the rooms how casting people and producers were responding to me, and my instinct told me to hold out. Taking a major risk, I said, "I can't do it, Nancy." There had to be a moment of frustration for my agent, who was pushing so hard for me. Nancy quietly checked with me one more time. "Are you sure?" And I was. She took a deep breath and released the offer, but she wasn't angry. She trusted my gut, and she had faith in what we were building. True to my instincts, only 2 weeks later, a new opportunity came along. It was to audition for the guest star role of a student who had contracted HIV on a different world. The show had been on for 3.5 seasons, and thanks to the stewardship of Debbie Allen, was unlike anything on television at the time. Originally, the show about student life at Hillman, a historically black college, had been conceived as a Cosby spinoff. It was a sitcom, but a bold departure from the standard fare, with Debbie overseeing the development of multifaceted characters, relationships, and storylines that reflected the concerns, social issues, and culture of black college students and faculty. My intention was to go in and faithfully portray the student who had HIV and give a great reading. After I read for the role, Debbie seemed impressed, and we started talking. I immediately had to tell her that I couldn't believe I was sitting in front of Debbie Allen in person, and that she was my only inspiration for believing I could have a multifaceted career. However the words spilled out of me, I can't recall precisely, other than me letting her know she was the artist who had given me a blueprint for what was possible. As I excitedly acknowledged her, intent on showing her every bit of appreciation and awe I could muster, I expressed what was in my heart. "You are my biggest inspiration." Debbie smiled that beautiful maternal lioness smile of hers, saying, "Tell us a little something about yourself. Where are you from?" Not expecting that question at all, I seized the moment for the next 2 minutes, mentioning that I'd gone to Baltimore School for the Arts, not unlike the School on Fame, where I'd studied acting, dance, and voice. I finished with much enthusiasm. "I'm going to be the next Debbie Allen." Debbie cracked up laughing. She wanted to know more about me, so I told her my family history and how I got to LA. Debbie was intrigued and engaged. After I recounted the broad strokes of my life, Debbie paused and looked into my eyes as she spoke, thoughtfully saying, "We're going to give this role to someone else." I nodded. She went on, "I want you on this show as a series regular." "Are you serious?" I responded as calmly as I could. "Yes, baby. I want you on this show. I'm going to create a role for you based on your life." I thought I would cry. Not because I'd just been told I was going to be on one of the hottest shows on television, starring next to the one and only Jasmine Guy, but because my idol, the woman I had admired all my childhood, saw me. Debbie Allen felt my presence. She saw my promise, and she believed in me. What could feel more rewarding or make me feel more worthy than that? I felt seen by this incredible woman in a way I had never felt before. More than anything else, within this experience, I felt loved. There would never be another experience in an audition room that would make me feel that way again. And there has not been a day since I met Debbie Allen that she has not loved, supported, and cared for me, no matter what. I love you, Debbie. Needless to say, I could barely speak. This was a career-making moment like no other. The role of Lena James didn't exist before I walked into that room, and Lena James would catapult my career to the stratosphere. The kicker was, my painful past was the very thing that allowed me and my character to be relatable, emotionally meaningful to audiences, and to many, lovable. For the next 2.5 seasons. When keeping it real cost you. Fat Joe on Red Table Talk 2022. Whenever we look at the places where we once were and recall how we made the leap to the places where we traveled next, we're given a chance to observe all the times in our lives when certain codes, keeping it real, for example, cost us. Or could have cost us. Looking back on the jump I made from the Be More streets to the fast lane of Hollywood, I was able to reflect with gratitude on the ways I was willing to change in order to take my life on a different trajectory. The hard part is unlearning old codes and following through with the new ones. The unwillingness to change our codes is the very thing that can keep us stuck, keeping us from the insights and the tools needed to enter a new territory of life. As challenging as it can be to change our codes, it can be just as challenging for those who have been on our side to understand why the change must happen. The big blow for a lot of us comes from realizing that not everyone gets to go on the next part of our journey, and that can hurt badly. In straddling two worlds, we may question our loyalties and see ourselves as frauds for not being able to uphold the very code that helped us survive. Most of us genuinely want to take everyone with us. Some are ready for the new codes. Many aren't. But we can honor the past and never forget where we began without sacrificing the glory that is ours to claim. A glory we all deserve. Can you identify a few codes in your life that have been hard to let go of? Can you see how holding on to old codes may be keeping you stuck? Try on a new code for size. One that allows you to continue to be real without the cost.